What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the PFN Scouting Podcast, joined as always with my good friend Derek Tate, fantasy football, NFL draft scouting analyst. Today, we have a fun episode for you. Only a few more before the NFL draft. It was 4, now it's 3, then it's going to be 2, then it's going to be 1. We are right on the doorstep. It's very exciting, a little uncertain, a little scary, but we're there. We're almost at the precipice. So today we are hitting you with our final mailbag episode of the 2024 NFL draft cycle. The first one that Derek has done, we did a couple with Dalton in January and February. So Derek, you'll get a chance to field some of the questions from our listeners here. First off, though, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing all right. For those of you that are tuning in on the PFN Scouting YouTube channel, you're going to notice that last week I was clean shaven. This week I have a full beard. That's what happens when you're doing nothing but diving into tape. Yeah. Around the clock, approaching the 2024 NFL draft. This is, I'm being on a short-term contract with the scouting department. So I'm diving head in, but, sometimes you just don't even have time to shave when you're doing, Sione Vaki tape study late at night. So sometimes you just skip the shave session and now you see a much more bearded man before you today.
Yeah, they know the drill from me because I feel like I have a different tier of beard fullness every week. It feels like, sometimes you let it go a little bit more. Sometimes you can pare it down a bit, but when it's draft season, you can never fully get rid of it because it just comes back. You're like, oh, I was watching tape for 24 hours. It's back. All right, whatever. That's just how it is. It's part of the game. But we have a lot of questions. We have, I think, almost 24 probably, both from the listeners and the readers on Twitter and X, and also some of our good friends at PFN. So we're going to get right into it. The first one today, pretty on brand from our CEO, Matt Canada. Vontae Mack or Bo Callahan? Who you picking, Derek?
Vontae Mack, no matter what.
Vontae Mack, no matter what.
No matter what.
I got to say, man, though, quarterback, linebacker or quarterback, like if you needed both positions, I get that no one came to his birthday party. All right. I get that. Right. But maybe they had existing obligations, maybe honestly, once you get past 21, the birthday is just like, oh, come on, another year. Are you kidding? Right. Once you get to 21, you get up to 21, you're like, all right, this is cool. We're getting older, we're having fun. And then you get to 24, 25, just like, all right, come on, let's stop the clock, slow down. I don't want to keep going. So it's a love.
Yeah, when you get north of 35, it doesn't get a lot of fun. The hair start getting grayer. I'm fighting a 2-front war. It's another reason why I'm wearing the hat. It's starting to recede, going up in the front. It's starting to get a little island in the middle. Thankfully, it's just a square shot that I'm looking right into the camera because the hairline, it doesn't get any better as the years go on. So
yeah, so it's like one of those things, man. I get it. But quarterback, linebacker, the whole positional value thing. We could talk about that for hours, but it's draft day. So it's bottom line, get it on your calendar to watch it before the draft, or else Canada will fire you if you're a PFN. If not, I'm kidding. But it's a tradition for sure every year. So thank you, Canada, for that one, keeping us honest there. Let's move on to the next one. And this is from our good friend Ali Hodgkinson. How high will a kicker or punter be selected in the 2024 NFL draft? Now, this is Ali. He's a specialist. That's his realm for sure. And he's the best at it. I'll never reach his level of specialist evaluation. The name at the top of my head is Torrey Taylor from Iowa. I remember there were some games where he took over with his punting ability, his accuracy. He's got a big leg. Could definitely see him being drafted. I think usually the earliest they'll go, right? And I know we saw Jake Moody go in round 3 one time, but for the 49ers, but that's a little too early for me. I'm usually a round 4, round 5 guy at the earliest. What about you, Derek?
Don't forget about Roberto Aguayo from
true.
Florida State and Jason Light, in his pre-Tom Brady days when I was not always on board with all of his decisions in the draft, but he did kind of take a big cut and a swing and a miss with Roberto Aguayo. I'm going Ryan Rico out of BYU, though. That ball just shoots off his foot. I mean, he's got leg strength that probably rivals your favorite Avenger. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna I think he had like a 60+ yard punt in 7 games in 2023. So just from a pure leg talent standpoint, I could see Rico from BYU being a guy that maybe goes in the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, and that's beyond my jurisdiction. I know teams, some like more accuracy, precision, some like leg strength to kind of, unearth extra talent, but it's one of those things where every team is a little different. So specialist evaluation, we'll put it on the docket for next year to reach the next level in that. The next question, does Derek Tate actually know what he's talking about? And this is from Derek's dad, Keon Coleman Stan. Now I'm not even going to answer this. I'm just going to back you up, Derek. You've been on the pod for for a few episodes now. You know what you're talking about. I'll back you up.
Oh,
I'll back you up for sure. There's diversity of opinion, and that's okay. That's welcomed. So I just wanted to back up Derek on the record here. We're going to move on to the next question. Well, do you want to respond to your father first off?
Oh, my dad just has Keon Coleman as the bona fide wide receiver right behind Rome Odunze. And I just was kind of kindly pointing out, hey, I have some concerns about his separation and win rate against press coverage and winning against man coverage to operate on the outside. And we can have a more nuanced discussion, but he watched a lot of Florida because he lives in Tampa, Florida, watches a lot of FSU football, and is pretty adamant that he's going to have success in the NFL, and is kind of surprised that I have as many concerns as I do.
Yeah. And, the separation upside is probably the biggest thing with him, right? You want him to expand the route tree for sure. And I think a guy who's as much of an alpha in contested situations as he is, you worry if he's going to have to rely on that to a fault at the NFL level, because we see that so often with guys. When you can't separate at the NFL level consistently with a full route tree, that can severely restrict your flexibility and your usage versatility in an offense. So it's going to be something to keep an eye on with him. But the explosiveness, the rack ability as well, like I do think there will be a role for him. It's just the projection is a little more uncertain because of that. So it's tough. And this wide receiver class, and I'm sure we'll get into it later with some of the questions we have, but there's a lot of depth and talent. So it's all about playing the value of the board, and you don't want to take a guy too early if you have questions like that.
Exactly.
Yep. Our next question comes from Mike Gambardella at PFN. Thank you, Mike. Could 6 quarterbacks really go in round 1? This is a fun one because it kind of takes into account player projections, but also team needs. We're pretty certain that 4, it's a lock. Four quarterbacks are locked. You got Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy. And then my prevailing opinion has been one of Michael Penix or Bo Nix will probably go round 1 too. I don't know which one it is, but if you asked me, if I was betting money on it, I would say one of those guys go. I would probably lean Penix because his medical checks cleared rave reviews and the processing, and that shows up on film. And then he ran really well at the pro day. So, he's got some linear mobility as well, and the arm strength is there. But Bo Nix and the right offense could also be a quality starter. Do you think one of those guys, both of them, neither of them? What are you feeling right now?
If I were a betting man, I would say 5. I do think Penix goes in the first round. It just really all depends on what NFL team evaluators and teams that are in the market for a quarterback, how concerned are they about his medical history? Like they're getting all these medical clearance and checks on these prospects coming in. And it's been widely discussed that Penix has failed to finish 4 seasons during his days at Iowa with 2 catastrophic knee injuries. So sure, he was durable and available during his days at Washington, which has seen his draft stock rise immensely because of it. Certainly, I like the flashes. I like the pre-snap processing for Michael Penix. His delivery is not going to be for everybody, but it's a left-handed delivery, which is always kind of a little bit funky. I think it's 5 quarterbacks. But if someone believes that Bo Nix, a quarterback-needy team, maybe cough, the New York Giants, and they decide to go in a different direction at 6 overall, or maybe someone trades in front of them to go get JJ McCarthy, do they believe Bo Nix is a potential starter? Do they trade into the back end of the first round to have that 5th-year option on the rookie deal for first-round picks? I do see that being a plausible scenario, but once we get past the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't know if I see any quarterback needy teams. So that's going to be very interesting. The Broncos, the Las Vegas Raiders for Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Once we get past them, it's kind of a little bit dicier for Penix and Bo Nix's first round draft stock.
Yeah, and it's tough because you look at the QB needing teams at the top of the board, right? Like we know 4 QBs are a lock, and you have the Bears who are probably going to pick Caleb Williams, the Commanders who will probably take Jaden or Drake May, and then you have the Patriots who really don't have any reason to not stay at 3 and take a QB of their own, right? So that's 3 QBs right there. So you have one of those top 4 left to fight over if you're Minnesota, the Giants, the Broncos, and the Raiders. So only one of those 4 teams is going to get that 4th quarterback. So then you could be left with Denver, Las Vegas, and New York or Minnesota with still a need at quarterback, and you've only got Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, right? So I could definitely see a scenario where one of those 3 teams is like, hey, let's get our guy at a certain valuation, and that could be in the teens where they are. It could be trading back into round 1 to get that 5th-year option, like you said. But because of the scarcity of that top-end group, there is going to be maybe, I think, heightened demand at the right spot, right? It's just about valuing those players. Where should you pick Penix? Where should you pick Nix? I'm of the mind on that first round fringe, very, very reasonable to take those guys. I think if you want to trade back into the 20s or the 30s, that's the way to do it, right? But it's just playing the board, because if you pick them too early, like if you're the Broncos, right, they have the 12th pick and then they don't have another pick until 71. So if you're the Broncos, it might behoove you to play the board, trade back, and hope you can get one of those guys at a better value. So, but to go back to the question, probably 5 QBs, probably one of those 2, and then the other goes in round 2. Definitely a lock for 4. All 6 go in round 1. That would be surprising, but I think there is potential energy for that to happen as well. Moving on to the next one, we've got from Huday Know-It-All on Twitter. Thank you, Huday. What is the deepest defensive position in the draft? I've been going back and forth on this. What's your take?
Mine's cornerback. I actually really like this cornerback class.
Yes, I was going to say that too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have the talent at the top, Terrion Arnold, and then you talk about whether it's Kamari Lassiter, Quinyon Mitchell, whether you consider Cooper DeJean a cornerback or not, or you consider him a safety prospect. That's up for debate, but certainly he's a DB that could flex out to corner. But I like the talent that you can get in the second round, third round, even with like Max Melton, Kalen Carson, Ennis Rakestraw. And then even I really like Renardo Green out of Florida State. Yeah. And there's even some nice day 3 prospects. I don't know where Mike Sanders still kind of fits into this. I know he's more of a slot guy, but could be a late day 2 pick, day 3 pick. But a lot of kind of slot specialists that I think could make an instant impact for an NFL defense as a rotational piece early in their NFL career, and could even potentially develop into a full-time starter down the road. Yeah,
just in the slot mold, you've got Sanders still, you've got Jerrion Jones, you've got Thomas Harper, Tyke Smith. I mean, the options, Jarvis Brownlee the Jr. from Louisville, if you want. It's innumerable. It really is. And then on the boundary too, I just scouted DeCamerion Richardson from Mississippi State yesterday, and he actually entered my top 100. So you have a lot of really talented players, MJ Devonshire, Elijah Jones, and we'll talk more about them because there are other defensive related questions. But I think corner is probably the deepest one for me. If I had to pick another position, defensive tackle. I think a lot of 3-tech disruptors in this class, even beyond the top group, which is obvious. I mean, you got guys like Jawan Briggs, Justin Ebowigbe, right? Christian Boyd, Tyler Davis from Clemson. So I think day 3 is another really good spot to get a defensive tackle. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you. The corner class is looking stronger and stronger the more I look at it. I think there are a lot of really good players. Our next question, day 3 prospects who could join a starting lineup right out of the gate. That's from NFL Draft Fanatics. And then also in connection with this from our good friend ADI Avery. Thank you, Avery. Who are 2 wide receivers and 2 offensive tackles in the strong positional class for each position, who could be picked on day 3 and outperform their day 2 counterparts. They're kind of related, so I lumped them together. Sure. But some day 3 prospects who would join a starting lineup right out of the gate. I'll mention a couple guys that I just mentioned in the DB group. Tyke Smith from Georgia, and then Elijah Jones from Boston College. Elijah Jones is such an intelligent player. He's going to be a 25-year-old rookie, but I think he can start right out the gate. I think, explosive, good length, good competitiveness. He can play zone, off man, press man as well. He can play in the slot or the boundary. I really think he'll be a shorter prime, but he can help you right away. And then Tyke Smith, the more I watch him as well, the more I feel like he's underrated in this class too. Incredibly physical, coming downhill in support. He can play the slot. He can play in space if you need him to. Just a really versatile piece. And that versatility helps you get integrated early on in your NFL career. So those are a couple guys on day 3 for me. Your thoughts on that question? And I figured wide receiver was up your alley because we were talking about, a couple guys in the day 3 range who could be sleepers who outperform the Capital.
Yeah, no, I like all your thought process with the day 3 guys that you mentioned. Speaking of somebody that has a short developmental runway, but I believe can contribute immediately in the right situation, I really like Tyrone Tracy Jr. out of Purdue. Explosive athletic profile, creative runner with fluid hips, plus level lateral agility, ready-made skill set to catch passes and even pass protect. So what's there not to like? There's a lot that you can work with right out of the gates. And, entering the NFL, he's going to be 25 in his rookie year, which means, obviously the odds of him getting that, lucrative second contract, even if he blows up, is probably not very high. But with his skill set entering the NFL and his athletic profile, I think he could absolutely contribute to an offense pretty early in his NFL career. Could I say starter? I probably have to see an injury or something like that, have to push him into that starting role. But I certainly think he's got the physical tool set and the raw ability that really intrigues me. If he can just clean up some of his reads and kind of limit his temptation to try to bounce runs and get a little greedy with his jump cuts and stuff of that nature. Other day three guys, though, I got two wide receivers for you. I'm going to go Taj Washington, actually out of USC. I think this guy has a ready-made skill set to come into the league and operate as a slot receiver. Really, really savvy route runner. Love his ability to gear down and throttle down against zone. Got quick and sudden feet, and he's pretty nice yak threat. Seems to get the most out of, get the most out of every single opportunity he touches the football in space. Kind of physics-defying contact balance for a guy his size, but you saw, his connection with Caleb Williams. He's kind of a Caleb Williams bailout guy, but could give you a little bit more than just your traditional, underneath slot option. I really like Taj Washington's game. But another guy, we've already talked about him before, and I won't spend too much longer on him. Jalen Coker out of Holy Cross. You talked about Elijah Jones. I liked some of his reps when Holy Cross actually played Boston College this year. I thought Jalen Coker won some of those battles and certainly held his own against an NFL caliber talent. Excellent hands, explosive verticality, the best vertical jump at the wide receiver position at 42.5 inches, and a 1.52 10-yard split, which was right there with Rome Odunze, A.D. Mitchell, and Ladd McConkey. So, yeah, the 4.57 40 maybe suggests that he's not going to be the best vertical threat, but his route running too tells me that this man's going to be able to get open, and his NFL body control and strong hands make me feel like he's a day three guy that's flying under the radar because it's had Holy Cross on his helmet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every time we talk about him, I keep thinking to myself, what box does he not check? Because he's explosive, he's got size, he's got great hands, right? The route running is a work in progress, but getting better, and there's really bright flashes of stem work. He just seems like a guy on day three, in his work ethic. You look at his production, right? Rave reviews everywhere you go. So I really like him as a day three value option. Luke McCaffrey from Rice is another one. The versatility with him, the explosiveness, the bend, the strong hands, the QB background, right? Helps his route intelligence. And then a couple offensive tackles. Matt Gonsalves from Pitt is one. I think he, his season ended prematurely with an injury, but he's a very sound pass protector. I think he's got great knee bend, hand usage, not the longest guy, but really good play strength and frame density. And he's got good athleticism too. So I think he's a really solid guy that gets overlooked. And then Garrett Greenfield from South Dakota State. I was watching Mason McCormick a couple weeks ago, and Garrett Greenfield really stood out with his recovery athleticism. The dude is a freak athlete, and he tested like it for sure, but you can see it on tape. Like it allows him to recover his hip leverage so easily and close ground in recovery. I think that's a very important tool for young tackles to have, and he has it. So a couple tackles on day three that could outperform their day two counterparts. Moving on to the next question from Ethan Ebert. Who are some players who could go earlier and later than people expect? And there's also a question from Jay Morrison that we'll lump in here. Who was affected by the T'Vondre Sweat arrest? I believe it was driving while intoxicated or under the influence. One of those two, T'Vondre Sweat, nose tackle from Texas, was recently arrested for that. The month of the draft, not always a good look. And there's been reports coming out that there were some concerns that teams asked about, being a party animal, right? Kind of discipline off the field is a question mark with him. So we'll start with Sweat because that's the player that I think will probably go later than expected now, right? And it's kind of a cop out because you can see it when you can see it on the surface. It's easier to predict, but he's a guy who's been projected as early as round 2 this cycle because he's a nose tackle who does have that disruptive juice. But who's affected by it? Sweat, obviously. But I think if you're a team that's willing to take a gamble on him, I think you can get him at a cheaper price now as well. I think McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M is affected too, because to me, every time I talked about the nose tackles in this class, the top nose tackles, I felt like the value of McKinley Jackson in round 3 was better than the value of Sweat in round 2. Now, if you're McKinley Jackson, you might be the first nose tackle off the board, right? Because he does have the athleticism, the juice as a pass rusher. Again, he can encumber double teams. That's why I'm looking at that. And then other potential nose tackle candidates like Evan Anderson from Florida Atlantic, right? If teams are really concerned about Sweat's character, he'll fall. Like we've seen guys who are graded as potential day 2 picks fall to round 6, round 7, even undrafted because of that kind of thing. So I don't expect that to happen. I think he'll be picked at a certain point because the nose tackle position is so scarce, but there's definitely a higher degree of variance with it.
Well, in today's NFL too, you see so many defenses having to roll out their nickel packages all the time because of all the 11 personnel across the NFL, right? So you need that 0 or 1 technique is so valuable at nose. If you have a space eater that can cover 2 gaps. And so Sweat, while I do think that he was certainly in consideration for a second round pick, I don't see him plummeting all the way to like round 5 or anything like that. I say maybe, he drops to round 3, maybe early round 4 at the very worst scenario. But I think you hit the nail on the head. McKinley Jackson is the guy that probably benefits the most, right? Because if you have similar grades on those 2 players with similar skill sets, and you have maybe some sort of maturity or character questions about T'Vondre Sweat, and that is amplified by the DWI, then maybe Jackson is the one that benefits immediately on draft day with maybe late second round capital.
Yeah, for sure. And Jackson he's fun, man, because you look at the measurables for him, 6'1", I think 6'1.5" around there, 326, but almost 34-inch arms. So natural leverage, but great proportional length. He can control blocks with that combination. And he's got some legit explosiveness on his first step as a pass rusher. I definitely think there's a lot of upside there. Sweat is longer in his lower body, and you can see how that surface area helps him. Sometimes Jackson will play a little too far upright to compensate for that, but I do think you have a lot of upside there. So I think round 2, round 3, you could see that player who will go earlier than expected. I'm going to go with Ricky Pearsall from Florida. And I know he's been a popular top 75 guy, but I could see him going right outside of round 1. I think in the top 40 is possible. I wouldn't quite take him there because I don't think the testing athleticism translates quite as much on tape. I do think there are times when he can be a little more explosive out of transitions, but the testing athleticism, we've seen teams use it as a threshold before, and he hits every threshold. He's a phenomenal route runner. He's got great stop and start, lateral agility, deceptive tendencies, right? And then his hands are some of the best in the class too. So I just look at the toughness, the route running, the athleticism. I don't think he's going to get very far because if you can separate, if you can catch, I think there are some teams out there who will put him in that same bucket as Ladd McConkey, who's also viewed as a fringe first rounder. So I wouldn't take him that high, but that's my pick for who might go earlier than expected. Do you have a guy in mind for that?
I do. Jalen Wright.
Okay.
It seems like there's a lot of draft buzz kind of around after speaking of his athletic testing. Yeah. He tore up the combine. And while I certainly have some questions about his hesitation and maybe lack of decisiveness as a runner, certainly the physical tools are there, and an exciting athletic profile, which I think hasn't quite scratched the surface of his potential entering the NFL and in a class where there's not a surefire definitive running back 1 prospect. His athletic testing and explosiveness certainly could be enticing to an NFL team that wants to add a little bit of depth at running back.
Yeah, his vertical speed is phenomenal. I mean, when he has a lane, like he can take that thing to the house. So you love to see that. And then he does have some really great flashes of vision and creative instincts. I think he can still get a little more consistent there. But you are working with a lot of talent. So I could definitely see him going up the board. And you mentioned it too, the RB class, there's no really consensus RB1, right? Like Trey Benson is mine. Some people have Jonathan Brooks, but there's really no consensus guy. And I think that variance will invite some surprising results like that one. Our next one, team specific, from C. Henry on Twitter. Thank you, C. Henry. He's got a question for us, a situational question. If the Lions have Cooper DeJean, Darius Robinson, Byron Murphy II, Johnny Newton, A.D. Mitchell, and TJ Tampa available at 29 overall, who should they take? This is a tough one. I'm gonna put you on the spot first, Derek, so I can think about it some more. What are you thinking here?
I definitely had to think about it a little bit, and my notes tell me I'm not taking Murphy or Johnny Newton. They're not completely off the board, but with the signing of DJ Reader, that kind of checks that box, right? Then you address the cornerback position with the trade for Carlton Davis from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then signed defensive end, and Marcus Davenport to kind of add depth on that defensive side of the football. Look, I don't know about his consistent effort being the perfect fit for Dan Campbell's gritty, grinded out culture, but A.D. Mitchell is the pick to me. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's arguably the best big slot in the NFL. Then you got Sam Laporta, who's a problem at the tight end position as a man beater or just work in the middle of the field. He's the real deal. And then you got Jahmyr Gibbs, who is also a matchup nightmare for linebackers and even safeties as passing aside when he, flares out of the backfield, and he's dynamic. So I know that you have Jameson Williams, but I still see inconsistent hands from Jameson Williams, to say the very least. I don't see that problem at all with A.D. Mitchell. You can line up A.D. Mitchell outside, and if you're going to get a bunch of one-on-one opportunities and vertical explosive plays down the football field, A.D. Mitchell is a guy who can pay those off at, I think, a higher clip than Jameson Williams can. So I know the rich get richer, and that, I could see Ben Johnson really finding some creative ways to get A.D. Mitchell's some vertical shots down the football field. So I'm swinging for the fences on the offensive side of the ball with Mitchell, given all of these different options that are available potentially at 29 from our boy C. Henry.
Yeah, I'm going to say, if he can reach his maximum, right? Effort is a concern from down to down, right? But you don't see receivers with his size and athleticism who can separate the way he does when he's on his game, right? One of the best route runners that I've seen at his peak. So, I think the hands are really good too. I think there are occasionally times where he lets it inside his chest, but by and large, I think, the glimpses of really high end coordination in really high difficulty moments where he's going low for the ball or diving for it, right? Having to extend beyond his frame and high leverage areas and still coming away with it. I think that talent is definitely there. So I could definitely see that. If Xavier Worthy is there, I would run up to the podium to get him in Ben Johnson's offense. I think there's more alignment versatility with him. I think getting him in that mad genius look, use him on motions right down the field. Him and Jameson Williams in the same offense would be scary. And then Amon-Ra would probably get 200 receptions because he's just kind of working with all that space that they generate. So that would be fun. But since Worthy wasn't mentioned here, I'm going to assume he's not on the board. Thinking of mine, DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil. I think you can roll with that and then add more to the rotation later on. I'm going to go with Cooper DeJean because you lost Tracy Walker, you released him. So you have a need at safety. You got Kirby Joseph, you got Fatu Melifonwu, who's more of that kind of blitzing chess piece guy. He can play in coverage, but he's probably at his best when he's been in more of an attacking role. I think Cooper DeJean can be that final piece for this secondary. He can play boundary corner if you want him to, predominantly in cover 3 looks where he can play with his hips to the side, to his back to the sideline, right? His hips and his eyes to the quarterback. But in safety looks, like his eye discipline, his reaction ability, read and reaction, his closing speed, his playmaking ability, I think him and Kirby Joseph would terrorize quarterbacks. You don't know what you're looking at. You don't know what's available to you. And I think that kind of versatility, that playmaking ability would be phenomenal on the back end. Ideally, you had an edge rusher here because the depth of that falls off. But if Darius Robinson's the only one left, if the top 4 are gone, I'd probably wait to get a guy like Chris Braswell or Jalix Hunt or something like that. So,
even throwing him in with Brian Branch though, which Cooper DeJean, actually, I see some similarities between Brian Branch and Cooper DeJean's game, which is crazy because I see that kind of that hybrid slot / safety contributor, but can also flex out to corner. I really love Brian Branch's game, and he had a phenomenal rookie year. So, adding Cooper DeJean to that, all of a sudden that secondary becomes a bona fide strength if you add him to the mix. Yeah. So you can't go wrong with Cooper DeJean in my book at that point in the first round.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you do need him to play corner, he can, right? I think in that press man, in that scheme that employs more press man, you probably don't want him there all the time, but I think he can survive there. He's not a liability by any stretch. So he gives you that versatility too. You can fall back on. Our next question from Josiah Caswell at PFN. What's up, Josiah? We got, how do you think about Ricky Pearsall's fit with the Jaguars? Ricky Pearsall, they added Gabe Davis in free agency. They got Christian Kirk. So they have 2 components of that receiver room. But Ricky Pearsall, thoughts? Any options you prefer over him? Do you think they still need a big-bodied guy, or can they focus on a separator now?
I think they could focus on a separator. I mean, you've got Zay Jones on the last year of his deal, right? Signed a 3-year deal a couple of years ago. And Zay Jones has been productive, was productive even last year on the football field. I thought he had a really nice 2022 campaign. I see some similarities between Jones and Pearsall's game, but, do I think that Zay Jones could be a rotational piece and kind of elevate Ricky Pearsall, who I think is such a versatile piece in a receiver room? That's one thing that I love about Ricky Pearsall's game, is that I could see a scenario where he operates on the outside. Do I think maybe he's best suited as an X receiver? Probably not. I think actually he's going to do really well out of the slot, or you can even line him up at Z. But there's just so much to like about his game. So versatile. He's a guy that can come into any receiver room, in my opinion, and make an impact. It's just kind of what role are you going to ask him to play? So, yeah, I think that Pearsall could be a good fit for the Jags. I think he'd be a good fit for a lot of different teams. But, yeah, Gabe Davis is obviously your guy on the outside. Christian Kirk is going to primarily operate out of the slot. And kind of Zay Jones, could I see him being an upgrade over Zay Jones in 11 personnel? Absolutely, I could. So, yeah, I think Pearsall would be a good fit. You can make an argument for other potential fits, but I think if Ricky Pearsall gets to them in the second round, I'm totally okay if the Jacksonville Jaguars, run to the podium and add a talent like Pearsall.
Yeah, for sure. I think it depends on how the board falls for you, right? Because I think if a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. is still there at 17 overall, like depending on who else is there, like if Quinyon Mitchell is there, you take that, right? But for the Jaguars who have multiple needs, they're going to have to play it on a situational basis. So if Brian Thomas Jr. is still there at 17 overall, I think you get that size speed player who can also bring the movement Z, the route running boons of a smaller guy, with his flexibility, with his ability to cut stems, and his slot fade work is incredible. He's shown he can use releases to offset and stack. So there's too much upside for me to pass up on Brian Thomas Jr. if he's there. And even in round 2, I think if guys like Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Jalen Polk are available, Polk is one of my guys for sure. I know. Yeah, for sure. But I think definitely that profile is the movement Z, because you mentioned it. Gabe Davis is going to be more your boundary guy. Christian Kirk can move around, but a lot of slot work. So I think getting a movement Z player who can mix and match with Kirk is the way to go. Pearsall fits that for sure. I think Roman Wilson from Michigan is another fit for that. I think Jermaine Burton, if character proves to not be an issue, that's the biggest question for him, but I think he'd fit that talent category. And then Jalen Polk, I think as well. I think Polk fits that Puka profile where he's got that frame, 6'1", 203, 32-inch arms, really, really flexible route runner with all-encompassing alignment versatility, strong hands at the catch point. I would probably prefer Polk over Pearsall if it was between those two, but if it's Pearsall on the board and not much else at 40, I can't remember what pick they have in the 40s, but somewhere in the 40s, I think that would be optimal as well. So I like the fit, a few guys that might fit it a little better, but I think you're only standing to benefit when you had a guy with Pearsall's versatility, toughness, separation ability. So
Quick question. Would you rather, so if you're on the clock and you have Quinyon Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr. available to you for the Jags, you're going Brian Thomas?
Looking at
that secondary had some issues last year.
Secondary did have some issues. They signed Ronald Darby, who I think is underrated. Right. I think he's a solid veteran. You're putting me on the spot here. That's a tough question.
It's a tough one. You're getting a great player either way, but do you go a little bit over need, or do you want to, give Trevor Lawrence an elite vertical option, in my opinion? Gabe Davis is a nice player and everything, but the ceiling is way higher for Brian Thomas. So I like the BTJ consideration there. Yeah. I just don't know if I'd be able to go over Mitchell.
Off the top of my head, Mitchell has a slightly higher grade on my board, I believe. Hang on, I'm gonna check real quick. Hang on. I'm gonna check. This is a tough conversation here. All right, so oh my god, man. Mitchell is my 16th overall player, and Thomas is my 17th overall player. So dang. You really put me on the spot here. I'm going to go with Thomas. I think that physical profile is a bit rarer than Mitchell's. Mitchell's speed is incredible, but I think that size speed is rare. And we talked about the depth of the CB group. I think you could get a guy day 2 or even early day 3 who can compete in that strength. So I'm going to go Brian Thomas Jr., but it's a good question. I think, either way, it's a win-win for the Jaguars. So you get that guy for sure. Next question. to the board. I got to find my place again from Matt Infante at PFN. What's up, Matt? How you doing, buddy? We got which day 1 or day 2 offensive lineman is the best fit for Miami's scheme, the Dolphins scheme. And then he wanted us to shout out Zach Frazier, who is his confirmed draft crush. So best fits for the Dolphins. I think, they got Aaron Brewer in free agency, so I think he'll file in at center. So I think you're mainly looking at guard. You signed Isaiah Wynn, Robert Jones. You got those guys back, but you can still add more starting talent. Christian Haynes from UConn is a fun one, man. So explosive, flexible. He's got great torquing capacity. Cooper Beebe from Kansas State. The dude eats nails for breakfast. He gets out in space very easily. Very good blocker on the move. I'm trying to think of any others. Those are the two that come to mind.
Graham Barton at guard.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you like Graham Barton at guard?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I comp him at center. I comp him to Alex Mack, who was a really good starter for a really long time. I think their frames are similar, somewhat streamlined, but really good at driving power. Very explosive athlete. I think he could play guard or center, depending on wherever you want him to go. But at guard, man, his ability to drive power, again, he gets off the snap so quickly. And for being 6'5", 311, 312, he acquires leverage very easily. His pad level is never a concern. He's always driving from his lower body and channeling through. So he'd be my top one. It's just, are you willing to spend a first rounder on him? Because it's probably going to be a first rounder. Christian Haynes or Cooper Beebe, you might be able to get in round 2, and that's a separator. Are those your kind of favorite ones for Miami there?
So, yeah, all the guys you mentioned, one more I want to throw out there because I thought he was really effective as a wide zone blocker, which Miami loves to do. They like to try to get Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane out on the edges. Jordan Morgan out of Arizona.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I kind of think that, again, is he a first round talent? Could he be available in the second round? Probably not. But, certainly somebody that, as far as we're looking for scheme fit, I think Morgan fits the bill and checks a lot of boxes for what Miami wants to try to do in the running game.
Yeah, Morgan is interesting because he played offensive tackle at Arizona. A lot of people think he can stay at tackle. I think he could stay at tackle, right? But I think he projects better at guard because he doesn't have great length. And whenever I see a guy without great length, I want to see, do they have the consistency with their hand usage to counteract that? I thought Peter Skoronski did when he came out. He moved to guard anyway. I thought other guys, Graham Barton, I thought Graham Barton does have it, but he'll move to guard center because he projects better there, right? It plays to his strengths. Jordan Morgan, to me, isn't quite at that level of consistency with his hands to counteract it. I comp him to Matthew Bergeron from last cycle. Bergeron went to Atlanta and actually played really well at guard as a rookie. I think they both kind of have similar frames, similar high energy athleticism and foot speed for those frames, really effortless knee bend and leverage acquisition, recovery athleticism. But I think his ability to drive power, again, really compact frame, not a ton of wasted movement, I think that's going to help him a lot. So I think putting him at guard, and you mentioned it too, getting out in space, not an issue for him at all. He tore his ACL in 2022. He came back in 2023 and didn't lose a step. So I think that bodes really well for him. So a lot of fun players within that mold for Miami. I think if you need a guard who can get out in space, this class has a lot of what you're looking for. Moving on to the next question, another team-specific one from Ethan Ebert. Which prospects feel most like Packers prospects to you? Cooper DeJean was the top option for the entire offseason. Signing Xavier McKinney kind of reduced the need at safety a little bit, but I still think they have a need for a complementary safety to McKinney, and I think DeJean would fit well there. And then he can play cover 3 corner if you need him to. I know they're going to play a lot of middle field close with Jeff Hafley, but it's going to be more press man as well. So I think there's kind of a counterintuitive movement to play against DeJean. I think if you're playing with safety, though, he'd be a good fit. But for the Packers now, after releasing Devondre Campbell at linebacker, I look at some of those day 2 will linebackers. I think Junior Colson, Trevin Wallace, Edgerrin Cooper, I think one of those guys is going to be a Packer. One of them is going to be, because he's got size, athleticism, coverage ability, blitzing utility. Some of them have room to get more consistent run, against the run, processing gaps. But the athleticism is in the length and the physical profiles, tried and true. And I think they can develop that. So those are the guys that I'm feeling are the most Packers. You have a Packers guy in mind for yourself?
It was just Cooper DeJean. The only guy I wrote down. I mean, we're talking like Midwest, obviously Green Bay Packers up there in Wisconsin, and we got an Iowa guy that I think has the versatility and fits a big need. Anthony Johnson Jr., had a ho-hum rookie campaign, in my opinion. And right now, I think that he's the guy that's probably has the inside track to the starting safety role opposite of Xavier McKinney. And McKinney's a nice, versatile chess piece that I think can operate as either a box safety, but also can handle a lot of those single high duties because of his athleticism. Pair him with Cooper DeJean and you know, whether you want to roll with Stokes or Keyshawn Nixon in the slot, I do think DeJean can operate there too. So the versatility that he could provide to your secondary is something that I think fits perfectly if he falls into the lap of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, and he can play the slot. And another thing that gets glossed over sometimes with DeJean, because he's such a good playmaker on the back end, when he's at his playing weight, he's closer to 210, and he can play really good in support. He's very good combating blocks, deconstructing extensions, getting in the backfield, taking plays, and reducing gains. I think his ability to play close to the line of scrimmage, take really good angles, play physical, impose his will, that gets slept on, but he's legitimately a two-phase playmaker to the top echelon. So I think getting him underneath McKinney, who's kind of that post safety who can play single high, two high, I think that would be a perfect combination still. So it's DeJean is still the front runner for the Packers, which some Packers fans might get a little exhausted hearing that, but we're just the messenger. We're just the messenger. It's the truth. I'm sorry. You know, you want us to say the truth. That's what we're doing here. I'll also say if there's any versatile offensive linemen with tackle capabilities and length, I'll look at Brandon Coleman from TCU, Delmar Glaze from Maryland. Depending on how the Packers feel about Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, they could just stick with that. But I do think if there's a versatile tackle with guard capabilities who has the developmental potential to mold, Kieran Amagaji from Yale, another one, could easily see them taking one of those guys because they love that positional versatility where they can take a guy and file him in somewhere, wherever they need him. So I think that's
Martin's another guy that really stood out to me as an ideal fit for what they're looking for versatility and kind of figure it out there along the offensive line unit up front. So yeah, but I'm with you 100% on the needs for the Packers, and they're actually loaded up with draft capital. I'm very interested to see what direction they go.
Yeah, they always have the most picks, so they're by default one of my favorite teams just for that reason. Moving on, we've got who are the best fits for the Bengals at wide receiver on day 2 of the NFL draft. We've got a little under 5 minutes, so we'll pick up the pace here. But your favorite receiver fits day 2 for the Bengals?
So for me, Ricky Pearsall and Jalen Polk. I think those two players, if you come away with either of them on day 2, and you can even throw Malik Washington into that conversation as well, those versatile, movable weapons along your offensive formation to complement Jamar Chase and kind of fill that Tyler Boyd T. Higgins is a little bit more of your outside vertical threat, but if you're not bringing back Tyler Boyd either, then you're going to need that type of production and that type of skill set, which I do think Jalen Polk and Ricky Pearsall could step in day number 1 and be a very nice compliment to Jamar Chase. Yeah,
I love the versatility with Jalen Polk. I love that group of Roman Wilson, Jermaine Burton, Ricky Pearsall. I think any of those guys provide the versatility, the speed that you're looking for, the hands. Xavier Legette, if you were feeling uncertain about the future with Higgins, Xavier Legette, to me, if he's there in round 2,
that's a good fit.
Would definitely go for that, because I think he has the route running upside, the speed, explosiveness, the rack ability, but he's got some strong hands too. He can snare passes beyond his frame. So I really like the upside with that. Next question coming from Justin here at PFN. The RB class is perceived to be weaker. Jonathan Brooks coming off an ACL tear. Who are some RBs who can make a day 1 impact? I'll throw out a few names for myself. And I know you like this guy too, Dylan Lobby from New Hampshire. You knew I was going to say that. You knew it wasn't even a surprise. The receiving upside, I think he's got really good running utility with his ability to press blocks, very explosive, compact runner. Will Shipley from Clemson, I still like him a lot. I think he gets forgotten. His hip flexibility is absurd. It allows him to navigate tight creases, but he's a really good receiving threat too. Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State, big fan of him. I think he's a little undersold because he's not an elite athlete on the vertical plane, but he's one of the best creators at his size, being 6 foot 220. I think really savvy behind the line of scrimmage, opening lanes for himself. So big fan of him. And then Kamani Vidal from Troy. I'm curious to get your thoughts, because I think you wrote him up, or you are going to write him up. Yeah. But very complete runner who's compact, low to the ground, energetic, a good receiver. I think those guys all have a chance to be very solid day 1 contributors. Who are your favorite running backs in that mold?
Kimani Vidal, I'm with you 100%. I think this kid can really, really, really play. There are some shades of like Josh Jacobs I see on tape, right? Shoot. Compact build. Yeah. And I love his creativity as a runner. Certainly that he put nice play strength and is a very hard to get down on first contact. So no, definitely like Kimani Vidal. You already mentioned Shipley. I think that Blake Corum is being slept on a little bit. I mean, and I get that his explosive plays dropped from 2022 to 2023, but he was still a bell cow workhorse back that I love the way he plays with his physicality, finishes runs, and just always seems to have a knack of getting the most out of every run. So if that explosiveness reappears from what we saw in 2022, I think someone's going to get themselves a really good football player with Blake Corum.
Yeah, for sure. And we know the receiving utility isn't proven there, but he's got vision. He's explosive. He's physical. He's going to find a role for sure. I like that. A couple more questions. Sione Vaki from Utah, running back or safety. What are you playing him at?
Oh, I want him at safety.
Yeah.
The reps that I was taking a look at when it comes to Vaki, that processing and quickness to get to the football, and I like his angle discipline quite a bit. Physical player, obviously not afraid to mix it up whatsoever. I think he identifies and diagnoses very quickly and can provide plenty of support as a run support defender out of the nickel spot. So, the vertical athleticism, maybe not best suited for a single high safety, but as a box safety, kind of that strong safety type of role. I see Sione Vaki being a nice contributor to your defense and a rotational piece in the secondary. I liked him as a running back, but he would be a project as a running back prospect in the NFL. I like what I saw on tape. Him and Cole Bishop really made quite a nice little pairing.
Yeah, for sure. Cole Bishop, man, I finalized his grade and I was like, wow, this guy's very good. He ended up being in my top 50. So I like him a lot. And then Sione Vaki, I think Vaki has to be in the right role. I think he's better when he's able to, run an attack. I think when he has to process misdirections, that's when some hesitation can occur. I do think the initial angles can be a little too narrow at times because he'll be a little too over aggressive, but he's physical, he's explosive, he's very compact, he's a hard hitter for sure. And when he's in support, when he takes the right angle, he can be very, very impressive. I think the running back tape is just as exciting. So it's like, where do you play him? I think let him fail at safety and then play him a running back. Because again, I think that speed, I think that explosiveness, that physicality, it translates very well there too. We had one more from Jay. We'll get to it another time. We are out of time, unfortunately, but thank you everyone for the questions. It was a great time again. Final mailbag of the 2024 NFL draft cycle. Just another sign that the light is there at the end of the tunnel. We are almost there. In the meantime, we're going to keep speculating, keep talking, and bide the time until the time comes. Derek, thank you for joining me with this mailbag. Thank you all for submitting the questions. Until next time, peace out. Have a good one.